Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into an analysis that takes a hard look at a story you've probably heard a lot about, the idea that America is entering a new golden age of the economy. But this analysis suggests that maybe, just maybe, beneath all that optimism, there are some serious risks building up that we're not talking about. So let's get into it.
Right off the bat, the source material asks this really pointed question. What if this whole story of a golden age is only half the story? And more importantly, what if the other half isn't just about a simple recession, but something, well, a lot quieter and a whole lot more fragile? So let's start by looking at that first half of the story. You have to admit, it's a really powerful one. The idea that America is right on the cusp of a major economic rebirth, all thanks to a big comeback in manufacturing. It's a very appealing narrative.
So what are the ingredients of this promise? Well, the idea is pretty straightforward. You combine lower taxes with lighter regulations, you add in a ton of capital flowing into the country, and you use tariffs to pressure foreign companies. Put it all together, and boom, you get a manufacturing renaissance. It's a compelling formula, for sure.
But here's where it gets interesting. The source argues that the real power of this narrative isn't just in the economic numbers, it's psychological. Think about it. For communities that have felt left behind for decades, this isn't just about a paycheck. It's about reversing this feeling of decline, It's about restoring a sense of purpose and pride.
And this quote really gets to the core of the whole analysis. The danger here isn't that the promise of a golden age is a total lie. The real danger is that it's partially true. And why is that dangerous? Because a partial truth is just enough to be comforting. It can lull us into a false sense of security, making us completely miss the deeper structural problems that are quietly getting worse right under our noses.
This brings us to the first really big complication in the story, the element of time. The source makes a great point here, saying that economic policy doesn't work like a light switch you can just flip on. No, it's more like tectonic plates. The pressure builds slowly, invisibly, for years before you ever see the earthquake on the surface. And this timeline just illustrates that delay perfectly. A big policy might get passed in year one, but look at the path it takes. You need a year for capital to get committed, another for factories to get built. It can easily be 5 years or even more before an actual community starts to feel any real change in their day-to-day lives.
And this creates a really dangerous mismatch, doesn't it? Our leaders, they talk about these big changes in the present tense, like they're happening right now. And the markets, well, they often price in all that future success immediately. But for the average person waiting for a job, that relief is still way off in the future. So you end up with this bizarre paradox. The official numbers might start to look good, but the public's actual lived experience is just waiting. They hear all this talk about a boom, but the reality is the wait. And that gap can create a massive sense of disconnect and, frankly, a lot of frustration.
So, the big question is, if the real benefits from these policies are so far down the road, what exactly is keeping the economy going during this long waiting game? Well, this part of the analysis points to a kind of hidden engine, massive and increasingly normal government borrowing. The source lays out some pretty clear examples, things like bailouts for farmers or big subsidy checks. Now, sometimes these are presented as being paid for by new money, like tariffs. But in the end, if you're not cutting spending somewhere else, the accounting reality is that it's funded by debt. This isn't a moral point, it's just how the math works. And all that borrowing kicks off this powerful feedback loop. It's almost like a domino effect. First, government deficits shoot up. That means a ton more government bonds have to be issued to cover the debt. Then, to make sure interest rates don't go haywire, the central bank has to step in to stabilize things. That floods the system with liquidity, cash, which has to go somewhere. And where does it go? Into assets like stocks and real estate, pushing their prices higher and higher. The line between government spending and central bank policy has basically vanished. So what exactly is this liquidity? The source has a great way of describing it. It's the modern world's sedative. Think of it like eating dessert for dinner. Yeah, it feels great in the moment. It calms the markets, it pushes off any immediate pain, but it does absolutely nothing to build the underlying long-term structural health that an economy actually needs to survive. It's not the vegetables, it's the sugar rush. Okay, so let's pivot and talk about the heart of this whole golden age promise, the big manufacturing comeback. The analysis argues that we have to be super clear-eyed about what modern manufacturing really looks like, because it is not what most of us have in our heads. This table just lays it out so clearly. Back in 1955, manufacturing meant high employment. Today, It's all about massive capital investment in things like automation and robotics. It just doesn't create that many jobs anymore. And the jobs it does create are usually highly skilled and clustered in specific places. So you don't get broad prosperity lifting everyone up. You get these concentrated islands of prosperity. And this is the bottom line. If you're promising a return to the manufacturing economy of the past, an economy that's really just shaped by nostalgia, you are setting people up for a huge disappointment. That economic model that people are dreaming of, it just doesn't exist anymore. All right, let's start to tie all these different threads together. When you combine the delayed benefits, all this borrowed money, and these completely mismatched expectations, you create what the source calls a confidence trap. It's this uniquely fragile situation where, strangely enough, all the optimism on the surface can actually be hiding some really deep risks. So what does this fragile moment look like? The analysis breaks it down into 5 key parts that are all happening at the same time. You've got high national debt. You've got urgent political calendars that demand results now. You've got the long delay before policies actually work, intense pressure on institutions like the central bank, and on top of it all, these dangerously high expectations from the public. That is a really precarious mix. And this all leads to a pretty chilling history lesson. If you look back, major economic crises, they don't usually start when everyone is freaking out. They start when confidence is at its absolute peak. When everyone believes that this time is different, that the old rules just don't apply anymore. That's when the biggest and most dangerous risks are taken. So where do we go from here? Well, the analysis isn't saying a crash is inevitable. It's not a prediction. Instead, it frames the future as a choice, a fork in the road. Path number 1 is the path of adjustment. It's the hard road. It takes clarity, restraint, and a lot of patience. Path number 2 is the path of acceleration. Just keep hitting the gas with more liquidity, more stimulus, and more borrowing to keep that illusion of momentum going. And that brings us to the final critical question. The potential for real, sustainable prosperity might be there, but building that foundation takes time. The ultimate test is whether a system that's so driven by short-term political wins can possibly resist the overwhelming temptation to force that prosperity right now, before the underlying structure is actually strong enough to handle the weight. It's a tough question with no easy answer, and definitely one worth thinking about.